only have snow in Texas. Or is this Texas?
Wow. Where's the lamppost? Oh, look, Tucker's Delight.
Mr. Tumnus? Mr. Tumnus? Wow, it's so magical. But way too stinking cold. Let's go back inside. Hello everyone and welcome to Bound in Prose. I am your host Matt and I am joined again today by my younger brother Justin.
Mm-hmm.
So we are both fantasy nerds and Justin a little bit more so than me nowadays, so I thought I would have him join us today. And today we are going to talk about the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. So the Chronicles of Narnia, most people have heard of this book. It's a really well-known series for children, although I would absolutely say adults can get a lot out of it as well.
For sure.
But it was written in mind for children, and so it consists of 7 different books, which include The Magician's Nephew,
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
The Horse and His Boy,
Prince Caspian,
The Voyage of the Dawn Treader,
The Silver Chair,
and The Last Battle. So we just thought we'd kind of sit here and talk about each one sort of briefly, and then about the Chronicles as a whole. So the first book that we have, The Magician's Nephew, kind of starts everything off. And also, before we get started, a lot of people know this, but if you don't, this series is heavy on the allegory when it comes to Christian theology. And so I just wanted to bring that up as we sort of go through, because that's probably one of the things that we'll end up talking about.
Yeah.
So Magician's Nephew kind of sets the stage. You have Diggory and Polly are our 2 main characters for this one. And they have an uncle or a professor that they are visiting. Well, it's Diggory's uncle. And they end up getting these rings that bring them to like the worlds in between. And they end up in this brand new location of Narnia. It's also brings in the origins of the White Queen and how she came to be. Her name is Jadis, and they accidentally get her from her own world, and she sneaks in with them to Narnia. But then the other part of it is Aslan sort of breathing Narnia into life, and all of the talking beasts and the lands and all this kind of stuff. So it's the genesis of Chronicles of Narnia.
Right. And if anyone's seen the Chronicles of Narnia movies, or maybe there's some people who have only read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you know, the first book is, as he said, it is an entry point. It feels Narnian, but it almost doesn't feel Narnian. You know, it's just the establishment. It is the creation, you know, and going back to that allegory, it's like the creation story. You know, there's a lot of aspects to that, and, you know, you kind of get a glimpse of Narnia, but it's a very, I would almost say it's a very small view of Narnia in that first book.
Yes. Really kind of establishing like the main character, establishing Aslan as sort of like the god figure, or the central figure, and like we said, creating Narnia. And then you have like a unicorn, but it is fairly small on characters. But it's a good entry point. And it was not the first one that C.S. Lewis wrote. It's the first one chronologically. So also as we go through, we're going to talk about them in like the order that they appear in this particular edition.
Right.
So, and that's how we named them off. But we understand that that's not how they were originally written, and there's some debate on the order. So the next book is probably the most well-known, and I'm going to let you start off kind of talking about that one and what goes on.
Yeah, so the second book, at least in the order here, is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And that is one of those stories that everyone has heard of, and everyone has read a little bit of it, or you've seen the movies. You know, it begins off following the 4 Pevensey kids. You know, you have Peter, Edmund, Lucy, and Susan that go to the professor's house, which, if you read the first book, you kind of see the connection between, the professor in the second book, which I didn't catch when I first knew of the Narnian series, but they go to their uncle's house and they stumble upon this wardrobe, and they think it's just some plain ordinary wardrobe, but through that wardrobe they are transported into the world of Narnia. You have an encounter with the White Witch, with one of the Pevensey kids. There's a lot of kidnapping. There is a lot of that struggle battle between good versus evil. In that book. And the whole thing goes on, and it's defeating, or what they think is defeating the White Witch.
Yeah.
And
who has created 100 years of winter but no Christmas.
Right.
And then Aslan, as he starts to return, everything starts to thaw out, and the witch is losing her power. And so, anyways,
which is a very powerful moment when you think about even the allegory side of it. It's the presence of Aslan makes the queen weak. Just his presence, him being around, and everything starts to crumble, for her. But done in a beautiful, beautiful way. But you can't have the Narnian series without reading that one, because that one's so well known.
It's honestly still my favorite.
I would say so.
So the other ones, as we go through, there's not a really bad one in them, but
no,
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe still remains my favorite, and that's the one where the allegory of Aslan being the Jesus figure or the God figure, I think, is most apparent with his sacrifice at the end. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful story, and to me, it is definitely the strongest one in there. Probably why everybody knows that one, and there's been so many adaptations of it. Then we go into the next book, which is The Horse and His Boy, which kind of introduces us to some new characters and kind of starts to expand the world of Narnia a bit. Obviously, it is about a horse and his boy. It's about a boy who is a servant who is going to be put into slavery or sold off, and he runs away with a talking horse that's originally, originally from Narnia, or his family was from Narnia and he wants to get back there. The horse was also kind of sold off into slavery. And the story is about them trying to get back to warn the Narnians of the presence of this enemy army.
And I enjoyed A Horse and His Boy, but to me, that one was another one that didn't necessarily feel like Narnia. Because you go from The Magician's Nephew, and then you go to the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then you have this. And at least when I was reading it, it felt somewhat left field, a little bit. It was good, don't get me wrong, but it was different. After reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, going into The Horse and His Boy, it just felt different. But you still have a lot of those aspects of Narnianism in there, especially with the talking horse, So that is still apparent, but it's still a very good book.
Yeah, and the Pevensey children are not in that one, as well as two of the other main children that appear later in the series. And I'm pretty sure Aslan appears in every one of them. But he only appears at the very end of The Horse and His Boy.
Right.
And so it's just a lot of the characters that have been established are absent for most of that book. So I think that contributes to why that one feels kind of left field or odd. But it was pretty good, and kind of like we said, it kind of world builds a little bit more and talks about some of the other humans that inhabit, or some of the other tribes, cultures. And then we get into a series that really kicks off the rest of the Chronicles of Narnia, and that's Prince Caspian. Prince Caspian is, he's a prince that is basically set to inherit the throne. He is the rightful heir, and his uncle has married his mother, and they ended up having a child, which puts Caspian in danger because the uncle, who is this tyrannical warlord, is going to have to get rid of Caspian so the new heir that he had with the queen can assume the throne.
Mm-hmm. And this is one where the Pevensey kids are actually back in this one. So you have the break of A Horse and His Boy, when they're not really mentioned, or if they are, very little, to Prince Caspian, where they're reintroduced. But it's kind of interesting how they're reintroduced because, if you read any of the Narnian stuff, whenever they leave, or when they're in Narnia, when they're about to leave, they age. But then when they leave, they're put back to the exact way that they were whenever they left. And so you have a very odd thing where, the Pevensies who have taken the throne, leave Narnia, but come back at the same age they were when they visited Narnia the first time. So it's very interesting, but when they show up, they're still known, but unbeknownst to them, years and years have passed.
Yeah. Long time. And so, but it's about them helping to put Caspian on his rightful throne.
Right.
And Caspian is one of the central figures of the whole Chronicles of Narnia. Even though he doesn't show up to the fourth book, he plays a big role in the rest of the Narnian series. And I would have to say Prince Caspian is my second favorite.
I agree. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's...
Between that one and the next one, I would say.
So the next one is...
The Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that one.
So that one kind of takes a little bit of a turn because the only two Pevensey kids that are mentioned in that book are Edmund and Lucy.
Yes.
Because Peter and Susan are too old. So you have the two Pevensey kids come to this one, and then they also have a cousin of theirs named Eustace. Eustace is a new character in this book, but a character that is going to continue on for a while. But he and his two younger cousins go back into Narnia, and there's a break in time between Prince Caspian and the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I don't know if it's that big of a time jump, but there is a little bit of a time jump.
A little bit. Like, Caspian has become like the rightful king and kind of established him that way. And so whenever they show back up, he is on this voyage on the ship called the Dawn Treader, and he's trying to sail to the end of the world and unite like the different kings to totally establish this kingdom and all the loyalties to him and amass this bigger empire.
Right. And I think through that book, there is some really great underlying tones to that story, especially when you build up to the very last couple chapters. If you haven't read it, I won't spoil it, but it does a very beautiful job with ending a certain character in that book, the very end. And you're talking about the idea comes up about Aslan's country. That's mentioned several times in some of the other ones, but that plays a really key role in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and I think it ends just beautifully in how C.S. Lewis wrote it. Especially if you've seen the movie. If you've seen that movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's a very beautiful, very good ending, but a very good book. I would almost argue that for me, Voyage of the Dawn Treader is probably the second for me. I really love Dawn Treader.
Yeah. And so the sixth book is The Silver Chair. Now, this after we've had so much with the Pevensey children, and Eustace comes back in this one. Then we get a new character named Jill Pole, and she and Eustace end up back in Narnia. And this book is pretty much all about them trying to find another heir to the throne that is like hundreds of years down the line from... Well, no, not quite. Because Caspian is still king, but he's just much older.
Much older, yeah.
They're trying to find Caspian's son, Prince Rilian, who has gone missing. And they find out that he has been taken underground by another witch, not the White Witch, but another witch, and he has been enchanted. And basically, the enchantment that he is under comes from this silver chair.
Right.
And so they go through like the land of the giants, and end up finding Prince Rillian and freeing Prince Rillian. Now when I just talked about that, it actually sounds pretty interesting, but that is probably my second least favorite book.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it kind of also does what The Horse and His Boy does. It kind of has a middle book feel to it, we got to fill in some of the gaps sort of book, and it's very focused on the journey, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely slows down a bit more from the others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the way that Lewis did it, it does kind of, I almost call it a bridge book, because it is a bridge between Voyage of Dawn Treader and The Last Battle. And there are aspects of that book that are very well done, but I would have to agree that it is probably down there at my second to least favorite out of all of them. Even though it still feels very Narnian, but it just doesn't read the same. But again, not in a bad way. I mean, I still suggest you read it, but that one is a little bit more of a challenge to get through, I would say.
I thought so too. And then the last one we have is The Last Battle. And this one is exactly what it says it is, in some ways.
In some ways, yes.
But it is. It is the conclusion and the wrapping up of the story of all of the children, the story of Narnia, the story of, this particular Chronicles that he has set up. And we will talk about that a little bit more, because that one, I feel like, has got some of the most symbolism and allegory to really talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So some of my favorite aspects of the Chronicles of Narnia, it has such a magical quality to it, and not just because it's fantasy. I think that C.S. Lewis's writing is so much fun, and it is a kid's book, and so there's a lot of playfulness in the way that he writes it. Sometimes, he'll speak directly to the reader, and he'll say, we're not going to go into detail about that, because if you've read this book, you already know, or that adventure took place in this book. And so he kind of almost breaks the fourth wall talking with you, but it's very, I don't know, it's warm and cozy. All of them are very warm and cozy reads and very escapist. So,
and let me kind of also say that if you're an adult and you've never read Chronicles of Narnia, don't let the idea of it being a kid series take you away from it. Because I think this series as a whole, even as a fantasy reader, both of us are, I would put this series at the top of my fantasy list as a whole. It is yes, it is based and is focused on kids, but there are so many things that you can get out of this series if you are a lover of Lewis. If you love Lewis, and maybe you've read some of his other works, and you've not touched this, touch it. Take a shot with it. Because it is just beautifully done, and it is very much escapism. I mean, it does transport you to, this world of Narnia, and it's beautiful writing.
Yeah. And it's a perfect thing to have on audiobook. It's the perfect thing if you're driving, or if you're at the gym, or cleaning your house, pop in one of the Chronicles of Narnia. They're pretty short books. Especially as an adult, you can get through them pretty quickly. So it's not this overwhelming task.
Right.
But I mean, we did it this past year, and it was not an issue at all.
Right, and that's kind of how I did it, because me being a digital reader, as also an Audible user, that's how I would listen to them. It would be if I'm driving or at the gym, I would pop it in. We went on vacation and we listened to it in the car.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, I completely agree. It's not something that you have to, because this right here is all of them together, right? But each one is maybe about 200 pages, maybe if that.
Maybe, yeah.
Some are maybe less than that, but they're quick and easy reads. But the escapism is still very much real.
And if you have kids, go ahead and get them reading them too. Read them together. I mean, they're designed for kids, so you don't really have to worry about the subject matter. I know some people read The Last Battle and they use a different word for donkey, but I mean, other than that. So we like talked about the Chronicles of Narnia is very heavy with like Christian symbolism and Christian allegory, and some of the middle books maybe not so much, but it really does follow like the progression, or it brings in like theological ideas that are very central to Christianity. I mean, we have the story of Genesis, and then at the very end we basically have Revelation. And so it's really interesting, and I'm going to go ahead and say spoiler alert for this. I know I've kind of, we've given some spoilers up to this point, but heavy spoilers here, everybody. So The Last Battle, I kind of went into it, and I had seen other YouTubers talking about how it's a really dark and depressing ending to this series. And I have to absolutely disagree. So the very ending of it, there's this whole thing where there's a donkey who pretends to be Aslan and an ape who's kind of manipulating him and making him do it, but the ape's doing it for his own like power and to try to get the rest of the Narnians to like bring him food and do whatever he wants, and then there's like the human army, and they fight with the Pevensey kids, and basically all of the Pevensey kids come back for this one in a form or fashion. And you find out at the end that this current Narnia is ending. And so Aslan tells them that all worlds must end, but they go through into a new Narnia. And it's basically this new Narnia is heaven. And you find out that the kids were killed in the real world in a train accident, but they are getting to stay in this new Narnia that Aslan has created. And the ending of it, the last couple of paragraphs, especially if you're Christian, are like some of the most, it's beautiful, absolutely stunning, and it reminds you of the hope that we have after this life. But yeah, I did not find The Last Battle to be dark at all, even though technically, if you look at that from other perspectives, maybe you could feel like that, like the bad guys win and the children are dead and Susan gets left behind. I think it's very realistic. So talk about Susan for a second. So what happens with her?
So Susan, because Susan only makes another appearance after The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. She only makes one other appearance. And Susan is this character that is very analytical. She's very, she's the adult of the four. In other books in the series, she's like, they'll be playing snowballs outside or hide and seek, and she's like, stop playing. That's Susan, right? And so when you get to the last book, it's revealed that, I want to say he says Susan is no longer a friend of Narnia. And when you read that, it's like, you don't expect that, but when you look at the rest of the series, it makes complete sense of what kind of a character Susan was. And so the other three Pevensey kids come back to Narnia one last time, but Susan is not. Susan is not a believer anymore, and it doesn't really go into too much detail about Susan other than the fact that she's just no longer a friend of Narnia. And it's kind of just dropped, with that point. And so, which makes it a little bit sad, because it's like you really want all the Pevensey kids to be together, especially when you find out, they're all killed in a train wreck. It's like you want them all to be together, but they're not. And I think depending on your worldview, which you were saying earlier, a lot of people say a lot of that end of that book is dark, but from our perspective, our worldview, it's like it's a very beautiful ending to the series as a whole. But it does leave a lot of room for interpretation, especially with Susan, because it's just not mentioned and she's just not there, So that part's fascinating.
Yeah. With it incorporating so much Christian theology, like I don't think that there's a better way that it could have ended.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, because it ties it together in the way that the Bible does. I mean, you get the beginning and the end.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go through the whole story of this world, but the beginning and the ending are so heavily influenced by Christian theology.
And even just what I was just thinking now that you said that, it's like there's a lot of symbolism in there, even with Susan, the other Pevensey kids, because especially in the Christian worldview, you do have people that are believers and people that are not,
Mm-hmm.
and some people will be taken, some people be left by. So basically saying that the Christian symbolism with Susan is very deep.
It is. And and sad. I mean, from the Christian perspective, I mean, for people to walk away from the faith or not be friends of Narnia anymore, and you read the ending, and the Pevensey kids and Jill Pole and Eustace, and they're meeting back up with like Reepicheep and Tumnus the Fawn, and it's this big, beautiful gathering, and Susan is not there.
Right.
And so, and then the very end of the last battle, C.S. Lewis writes like basically that what had been talked about before was merely like the beginning. It was basically the prologue, and that there were so many chapters to come after that, and every chapter was better than the last. So he's basically saying they spent eternity happy. I mean, how can that be a dark and depressing ending?
Right. Yeah, because you do have this whole build-up, and you spend time with these characters all through this book, and then you get to the last battle, and he said, everything that has happened prior to this is not the end, it's the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so what a great way to have or to show hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything that we go through in life, it's when we leave this earth, it's not the end, it's the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like the book has just started, and so it's just gorgeous. I mean, and I know that a lot of people will not pick up, Narnia because a lot of those Christian symbolisms, and we just speak from our position because we are both Christians, and so we can't help but read the book with somewhat of a lens,
Mm-hmm.
because of our worldview and
Mm-hmm.
because of how we interpret it. But to me, there's no better way to interpret it than that, because
Yeah.
it is so evidently clear of the dynamics between the symbolism between Narnia and heaven and Christ. I mean, it's just gorgeous books, and I suggest that everyone, if you haven't read them, read them. I think you'll enjoy it, and I think you'll be blessed by it. Really, I do.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so let's go through really quickly, and we're just going to kind of give you our star rating for each, and then we'll give the star rating for the Chronicles as a whole. You can probably already guess what it is, but we'll just say it.
Okay.
So,
Magician's Nephew,
4 stars.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
5 stars.
The Horse and His Boy,
3 stars.
Prince Caspian,
5 stars.
The Voyage of Dawn Treader,
4 stars.
The Silver Chair,
3 stars.
The Last Battle.
5 stars. Okay, so for you, The Magician's Nephew.
I would give that 4 stars.
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
5 stars.
Horse and His Boy.
3 stars.
Prince Caspian.
4 stars.
Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
5 stars.
Silver Chair.
3.5.
Okay. And The Last Battle.
I gotta give Last Battle 5.
Okay. Chronicles of Narnia as a whole, I'm going to give a good old 5 stars.
Yeah, same.
So, the way that we're sitting here gushing about it, but it really is so good. And it's really quite something. I had never read them. As a younger person, I had read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe a few times. And then I tried to start from the beginning and read all of them. And I read Magician's Nephew. I reread Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I got midway through Horse and His Boy. And I was like, I just kind of quit on it. Because that one was just, at the time, that one was just like, this is not interesting to me at all. I just got bored with it. But then now I have been through the whole Chronicles.
Same for me. I did a play when I was in 2nd or 1st grade, something like that. We had like a little kids community theater, and we did The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. we did that. I've seen the movie. I had like a little comic book type thing growing up of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So, but I never read the series, and I'm 32, and I read the whole series last year. So,
you have the BBC ones too.
I do. I have the old BBC DVDs of them. Those are great. So, Narnia for me has always been inside of my world, but I never read the books until last year. So, yeah, 5 stars.
So anyway, that's going to do it today for us, folks. Justin, thank you so much for joining us again. Anytime we do like a fantasy series, I'm going to have Justin join us, and we're going to start our own little series. But today we just wanted to sit down and talk about Chronicles of Narnia. So coming up, I'm about to start reading Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. And then pretty soon, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about the first trilogy of the Realm of Elderlings, the Farseer trilogy. And so I just finished up Royal Assassin. He's going to finish up Royal Assassin either tonight or tomorrow. So he was kind enough to take a break from reading that to come film this video.
It shows I care.
Yeah. And so then we're both going to do like an in-between book. I'm going to read Pachinko.
I'm going to read People in the Trees by Hanya Nagahara.
And then we're going to probably go ahead and wrap up Assassin's Quest. So be on the lookout for more fun stuff to come. And we will see you again pretty soon. Happy reading, everybody.
Sounds good. See y'all. We forgot. Make sure you follow us on Goodreads.
Yes. Bound in Prose.
Justin's Book Adventures. Follow us.